Silver and global commerce. Even more than the spice trade of Eurasia, it was the silver trade that gave birth to a genuinely global network of exchange. As one historian put it, silver went around the world and made the world go round. The mid-16th century discovery of enormously rich silver deposits in Bolivia and simultaneously in Japan suddenly provided a vastly increased supply of that precious metal. Spanish America alone produced perhaps 85% of the world's silver during the early modern era. Spain's sole Asian colony, the Philippines, provided a critical link in this emerging network of global commerce. Manila, the colonial capital of the Philippines, was the destination of annual Spanish shipments of silver, which were drawn from the rich mines of Bolivia, transported initially to Acapulco in Mexico, and from there shipped across the Pacific to the Philippines. This trade was the first direct and sustained link between the Americas and Asia, and it initiated a web of Pacific commerce that grew steadily over the centuries. At the heart of that Pacific web, and of early modern global commerce generally, was China's huge economy, especially its growing demand for silver. In the 1570s, Chinese authorities consolidated a variety of tax levies into a single tax, which its huge population was now required to pay in silver. This sudden new demand for the white metal caused its value to skyrocket. It meant that foreigners with silver could now purchase far more of China's silks and porcelains than before. This demand set silver in motion around the world, with the bulk of the world's silver supply winding up in China and much of the rest elsewhere in Asia. The routes by which the silver drain operated were numerous. Chinese, Portuguese, and Dutch traders flocked to Manila to sell Chinese goods in exchange for silver. European ships carried Japanese silver to China. Much of the silver shipped across the Atlantic to Spain was spent in Europe generally and then used to pay for the Asian goods that the French, British, and Dutch so greatly desired. Silver paid for some African slaves and for spices in Southeast Asia. The standard Spanish silver coin, known as a piece of 8, was used by merchants in North America, Europe, India, Russia, and West Africa as a medium of exchange. By 1600, it circulated widely in southern China. A Portuguese merchant in 1621 noted that silver wanders throughout all the world before flocking to China, where it remains as if at its natural center. In its global journeys, silver transformed much that it touched, and nowhere more profoundly than at Potosi, the site of a huge silver mining operation in what is now Bolivia. In Spain itself, which was the initial destination for much of Latin America's silver, the precious metal vastly enriched the crown, making Spain the envy of its European rivals during the 16th century. Spanish rulers could now pursue military and political ambitions in both Europe and the Americas far beyond the country's own resource base. New World mines, concluded several prominent historians, supported the Spanish Empire. Nonetheless, this vast infusion of wealth did not fundamentally transform the Spanish economy because it generated more inflation of prices than real economic growth. A rigid economy laced with monopolies and regulations, an aristocratic class that preferred leisure to enterprise, and a crusading insistence on religious uniformity all prevented the Spanish from using their silver windfall in a productive fashion. When the value of silver dropped in the early 17th century, Spain lost its earlier position as the dominant Western European power. More generally, the flood of American silver that circulated in Europe drove prices higher, further impoverished many, stimulated uprisings across the continent, and together with the little ice age of global cooling, contributed to what historians sometimes call a general crisis of upheaval and instability in the 17th century. Japan, another major source of silver production in the 16th century, did better. Its military rulers, the Tokugawa shoguns, used silver-generated profits to defeat hundreds of rival feudal lords and unify the country. Unlike their Spanish counterparts, the shoguns allied with the country's vigorous domestic merchant class to develop a market-based economy and to invest heavily in agricultural and industrial enterprises. Japanese state and local authorities alike acted vigorously to protect and renew Japan's dwindling forests, while millions of families in the 18th century took steps to have fewer children by practicing late marriages, contraception, abortion, and infanticide. The outcome was the dramatic slowing of Japan's population growth, the easing of an impending ecological crisis, and a flourishing, highly commercialized economy. These were the foundations for Japan's remarkable 19th century industrial revolution. In China, silver deepened the already substantial commercialization of the country's economy. To obtain the silver needed to pay the taxes, more and more people had to sell something, either their labor or their products. Communities that devoted themselves to growing mulberry trees, on which silkworms fed, had to buy their rice from other regions. Thus, the Chinese economy became more regionally specialized. Particularly in southern China, this surging economic growth resulted in the loss of about half the area's forests, as more and more land was devoted to cash crops. No Japanese-style conservation program emerged to address this growing problem. An 18th century Chinese poet, Wang Dayue, gave voice to the fears that this ecological transformation generated. Rarer too, their timber grew, and rarer still, and rarer, as the hills resembled heads now shaven clean of hair. For the first time too, moreover, they felt an anxious mood, that all their daily logging might not furnish them with fuel. China's role in the silver trade is a useful reminder of Asian centrality in the world economy of the early modern era. Its large and prosperous population, increasingly operating within a silver-based economy, fueled global commerce, vastly increasing the quantity of goods exchanged and the geographic range of world trade. Despite their obvious physical presence in the Americas, Africa, and Asia, economically speaking, Europeans were essentially middlemen, funneling American silver to Asia and competing with one another for a place in the rich markets of the East. The productivity of the Chinese economy was evident in Spanish America, where cheap and well-made Chinese goods easily outsold those of Spain. In 1594, the Spanish viceroy of Peru observed that a man can clothe his wife in Chinese silks for 25 pesos, whereas he could not provide her with clothing of Spanish silks with 200 pesos. Indian cotton textiles likewise outsold European woolen or linen textiles in the 17th century to such an extent that French laws in 1717 prohibited the wearing of Indian cotton or Chinese silk clothing as a means of protecting French industry.